Welcome to Book Quarter at Al Sakal Cultural Foundation. This is the first of a series of podcasts that I want to do with friends of mine that are passing through Dubai, to have a free-flowing conversation with them. We don't know what direction the conversation is going to go into, but I'm sure it's going to go into interesting directions. So my first guest is Hajj Razzaq Goodall, or should I say Richard Goodall? Because I noticed that you use Richard Goodall quite often, whereas I'm always Idris Mears.
Good. Yeah, I used to use just Razzaq when in my early days of being Muslim, but it had the effect of stopping conversation in many ways, because people would take a step back and look, and how did you get a name like that, and so it would always involve an explanation, and then we were talking about me, but today we are a little bit, so I'm happy to go with Hajj Razzaq, which is my preferred name. But however, amongst others, when I'm traveling, I go as Richard, which was my mother's choice of name, and I'm happy to use that name because people get to know me in a language that they understand, and then if the conversation goes further, then they can learn who I am really.
So that's interesting, because I've met you first time in 1977, 78. And that was within the context of the Muslim community in Norfolk and then in Norwich, and we were a very enclosed, in a sense, insular community. But since that time, you've travelled a lot. So, and you're travelling now.
Yeah, I actually had been travelling before I met you, and it was, as it turns out, the answer to my quest in the East, because I had gone East to satisfy some yearnings that I had. I mean, not least in the sort of hippie, Hindu, Eastern wisdom sense, but actually more specifically, I went to find evidence, because I was studying anthropology at the time, and I was looking for evidence of the unseen, al-ghaib. And I had been reading and writing about such things. You will remember the books of Carlos Castaneda and others, they were popular at the time. And I went to India to find evidence of that. I wanted proof whether it existed or not. I didn't go to South America or Mexico. I chose India. I had family connections in India.
To South India?
South India, in fact, because my grandfather was a tea planter in South India, so that was my first port of call to pay respects to my great-grandparents who were buried there.
But you also went to study a particular pilgrimage.
Well, that came out of a village study, which was a common anthropological method to go and live in a village, learn the language, and mix with the people. In those days, I was a potter, so I mixed with the potter caste, and with them, after looking at their beliefs and practices, I went on a pilgrimage to a very famous shrine in South India called Sabrimala, which has been in the news.
Where a saint is buried?
No, they say he's a god, but as in the Hindu pantheon, many people, Gandhi is on his way to becoming a god. But actually, I've discovered that he was a Raja. He was a king who had fled to the hills, as many did when the Mughals came into India, and mingled with the wise and the tribes, up in the hills, and legends developed from that time.
So I find that quite interesting, because we've both come back from a visit to Uzbekistan. You came from China, where you were spending, I think, at least 3 months. You were there in China, looking at that end of the Silk Road. And I came here from Dubai, and we met in the middle in Uzbekistan. But whilst we were there, we went to visit Bukhara and Samarkand particularly, where there are great awliya buried. highlight of the visit was going to visit the 7 peers or the 7 teachers of the Naqshbandi Tariqa in Bukhara, and in a sense, when I went there, I met the people. So when you went on this pilgrimage with the Hindus before you became Muslim, did you meet anybody when you went to the shrine?
I was given, I would say, as in their language, I was given darshan, and darshan is a word that might be described or translated as a glimpse or a glance, and it was a brightness that sort of came in and proved somehow the mission. But just to link with what you just said, the step into the unseen which I made in India, which actually changed my life, because there was a point at which, having studied all these shamans and practitioners of different kinds of medicine down there, I was given some insight, and I attested to the existence of the unseen world. And so my journey started there. I met you in Norwich and took on the practice of being Muslim. I said the Shahada in 78, and
that was very soon after arriving back from India.
Well,
the initial meeting that you had, that was the doorway to you becoming Muslim.
Yeah.
Happened how?
Within 6 months. I mean, I argued with you at the time. I thought.
No, but the first meet, because I remember the actual story was
Yes.
that you were hitchhiking.
Yes,
and,
yes.
And one of our beloved brothers who passed away,
Well,
Hajj Aziz Redpath, picked you up on the road.
with the famous line, "Get in, I'll take you where you're going to," and mashallah, thanks to him, I not only became Muslim then, but I'm still on that road, and inshallah.
But he didn't stop for everybody on the road.
But he was
looking out.
He was looking out for people, and luckily he spotted me. But just to go back to the point about that you made about the visits to the awliya in Uzbekistan, my journey started in the south of India, and I've been fascinated by the way that ideas and beliefs and practices have spread from India, and particularly from South India. Buddhism came from South India, from Shivaism there. And for example, martial arts all came from Kerala and spread up India over the mountains and into China, and then on into Japan. So I've always been fascinated by that. Now, being with you in Uzbekistan allowed that affinity, if that's the word, with the unseen world. Once one accepts the unseen, then it allows a whole range of visits. They're called ziyara, to places for reasons other than tourism. And we clearly saw that is the way that Uzbekistan is going. There's the tourist route, which.
So you think there are places which have special significance? I mean, I haven't got the Ayatul Quran to hand, but I mean the translation, when it talks about Safa and Marwa, it calls them waymarks, that they're places that have a sacred geography to them.
Yeah, I wholly accept that. I think that is an ancient science, if that's the word, but an ancient knowledge, and people align themselves, and so therefore their burials, particularly with these ways.
So, isn't the significant factor is how you behave when you get to these significant places and significant people, and that part of the knowledge of Islam is the correct adab, that when you go to visit the man in the grave who is a wali of Allah, that you're meeting that aspect of him that reminds you of Allah, and that you are protected from the deviation, from turning that saint into and you said they turned the Raja into a god. but the wisdom of Islam will never allow us to do that. But at the same time, we have the recognition of the unseen and of this other activity that's going on.
Yeah, certainly. But I think one needs to take a step back to see how these places were first established. I mean, we know from our own British experience how ley lines and barrows were set up, you know, in the ancient past, and they have a mystique for people who are interested in trying to find a meeting point between, let's say, the sciences, geography, and what people might call spiritual, and it is often a point of starting for many people in the West. But in Uzbekistan, the veneration of tombs and holy sites has a long history, and one has to you know, as you say, the adab of visiting the dead, the awliya, you know, is something important to learn. But before you learn that, one has to see the practice of the people who actually set these places up in the first place. How did they do it? Why did they do it? And how do they treat pilgrims who are coming on the way to visit these places? And it's as in the Muslim context, they will say that because traveling to Mecca from China was such a long way, and you know, a lifetime trip sometimes, and people would never return from these journeys. Most people never return. Well, they stayed there, like once getting a job in the same as silk. And so, you know, all the time that I've been traveling on the Silk Road, looking for the unseen.
So your saluk,
my saluk,
has been the Silk Road.
It has.
Yeah.
And I've had such an amazing trip, and it hasn't finished. But inshallah, I will see you on it. Please travel. Please travel.
I think it's a good point to bring this particular session to an end. I'm going to thank Razzaq Goodall, Richard Goodall, for the insights he had, and I'm sure I'm going to find some more interesting guests and have conversations with them. Thank you very much. This is Idris Mears from Book Quarter at Razzaq Cultural Foundation.